The crystal halls of Veltaros Prime gleamed under the light of 3 suns. Kethra walked through the long corridors toward the high command chamber. Each step echoed in the silence. The walls around showed images of distant stars and planets. This was the heart of the Veltari Collective, where the most important decisions were made. Kethra had worked as a military analyst for 12 cycles. The job was simple most of the time. Watch other species fight their wars, study their methods. Report back to the Council. The Veltari stayed neutral in most conflicts. They preferred to learn from others rather than fight themselves. The chamber doors opened without sound. Inside, 5 council members sat around a curved table made of blue crystal. Their faces showed the calm expression that all Veltari learned from childhood. No strong emotions, no quick decisions, everything measured and careful. Analyst Kethra, said Council Leader Morthen. His voice was soft but carried authority. We have a new assignment for you. Kethra moved closer to the table. A holographic display appeared in the center. It showed a map of the galaxy with different colored zones. Red areas marked the Hegemony Alliance territory. Blue showed human space. Between them, a growing area of contested systems flashed yellow. The war between humans and the Hegemony has continued for 3 years. Morthen continued. Our initial prediction suggested the Hegemony would achieve victory within 18 months. This has not occurred. Another council member, Velnara, leaned forward. Reports from our monitoring stations describe unusual human tactics. Victory ratios that should not be possible. Strategic decisions that contradict all military logic we understand. The holographic display zoomed in on several battle sites. Numbers floated beside each location. Casualty reports. Resource expenditures. Time to victory. The patterns made no sense to Kethra. Human forces were smaller, had less advanced technology, yet they kept winning. We need direct observation, said Morthen. You will infiltrate human military forces. Study their methods from inside. Learn why they continue to succeed against superior opposition. Kethra felt a small chill. Infiltration missions were dangerous. Discovery meant death or worse, but the assignment seemed straightforward enough. What are the mission parameters? 6 standard months embedded with human forces, replied Velnara. Use biomimetic technology to appear human. Create a believable cover story. Observe and document their tactical approaches, command structures, and psychological frameworks. A third council member, Zarek, activated another display. This one showed technical specifications for biomimetic modification. Our science division has developed new techniques. Genetic restructuring, neural implants, behavioral conditioning. You will become physically and mentally indistinguishable from a human. The process looked complex but manageable. Kethra had undergone similar modifications for previous missions, though never this extensive. How long for the transformation? 14 days, said Zarek. The neural conditioning will take additional time. You must think like a human, not just look like one. Morthen stood and walked around the table. This mission is critical, Kethra. We believe this conflict will determine the balance of power in this galactic sector. The winner will control trade routes, resource systems, and potentially influence our own territory. We must understand how humans achieve these impossible victories. Kethra nodded. The logic was clear. Knowledge of human military capabilities would be valuable regardless of who won the war. What cover identity should I use? Refugee, said Velnara immediately. Human emotional responses to suffering create opportunities for infiltration. You will be a civilian whose family was killed in a border raid, seeking to join their military for revenge. Our psychological profiles suggest humans find such narratives compelling. The plan seemed solid. Humans were known for emotional decision-making. A revenge story would explain military service, provide motivation for combat participation, and justify any unusual behavior during the adjustment period. Approved, said Kethra. When do I begin preparation? Morthen returned to his seat. Immediately. Science Division is waiting for you. Remember, Kethra, this is observation only. Do not interfere with human operations. Do not reveal your identity under any circumstances. Your mission is to learn, not to influence. The next 14 days passed in a blur of medical procedures and mental conditioning. Kethra's body changed daily. Bone structure shifted. Muscle mass adjusted. Skin texture modified. The transformation was uncomfortable but bearable. The neural conditioning was worse. Human thought patterns were chaotic compared to Veltari logic. Emotions influenced decisions. Instincts overrode careful analysis. The conditioning forced Kethra to experience these alien mental processes firsthand. By day 10, Kethra could barely recognize the reflection in the mirror. The face was human, Asian features that would fit well in the Korean colonial populations. Black hair, brown eyes, medium build. Nothing remarkable or memorable. The psychological conditioning was complete by day 12. Kethra now thought in human language patterns, felt emotional responses to stimuli, could access memories of a fabricated childhood on a colony world. The family that never existed felt real in the modified mind. Dr. Helmuth supervised the final preparations. "Your cover identity is complete," she said, reviewing data displays. Kim Kethra, age 26, born on New Sol Colony. Parents and younger brother killed in hegemony raid 8 months ago. No other family. Escaped to human core world seeking military service. The name felt natural now. The memories of family seemed genuine. Kethra could describe the parents' faces, remember conversations with the brother, feel anger about their deaths. The biomimetic conditioning was thorough. "Transport to New Sol system launches tomorrow," Dr. Helmuth continued. "You will arrive as a refugee seeking asylum. Human refugee processing will direct you to military recruitment. Standard psychological evaluation should confirm your desire for revenge-motivated service." Kethra spent the final day reviewing human cultural information, language patterns, social customs, military traditions. The data felt overwhelming at first, but the neural conditioning helped organize everything into usable knowledge. The transport ship was small and uncomfortable. Kethra traveled with actual refugees fleeing border conflicts. Their stories were real, their pain genuine. It helped reinforce the cover identity. By the time they reached New Sol, Kethra felt like one of them. New Sol Colony existed on a mountainous world with 3 major continents. Most population centers were built in valleys between snow-capped peaks. The main city, also called New Sol, housed 2 million people. It was the administrative center for the entire system. The Refugee Processing Center was a collection of temporary buildings near the spaceport. Hundreds of people waited in long lines for documentation, housing assignments, and aid distribution. Kethra joined the line for military recruitment screening. The wait took 4 hours. During that time, Kethra observed human behavior patterns. People helped each other without being asked. They shared food and information. Children played games despite the serious situation. Adults comforted strangers who were crying. These responses seemed inefficient from a Veltari perspective. Resources spent on non-family members reduced personal survival chances. But humans appeared to operate on different principles. Community benefit seemed as important as individual welfare. When Kethra finally reached the recruitment desk, a human in military uniform looked up from data displays. His face showed signs of combat experience. Scars across the left cheek, eyes that seemed to see everything. The uniform identified him as Sergeant Hyunwoo. "Name?" he asked, fingers ready to enter information. "Kim Kethra," was the response. The words came automatically, feeling natural. "Age and origin?" 26. New Sol Colony, Valley District 7. Sergeant Hyunwoo's expression changed slightly. 7 was hit hard in the last raid. "I'm sorry for your losses." The words triggered the programmed emotional response. Kethra felt grief and anger rise in the modified mind. "They killed my family. My parents, my brother. I want to make them pay. That's why you want to join up?" "Yes, sir." "I want to fight. I want to kill every one of them I can find." Sergeant Hyunwoo made notes on his display. "Military service isn't just about revenge, Kim. It's about protecting people, making sure other families don't suffer what yours did. Can you accept that responsibility?" The question surprised Kethra. The response was supposed to be simple revenge motivation, but humans seem to think in more complex terms. "Yes, sir. I understand. I want to protect people too." "Good." Hyunwoo processed more paperwork. "Physical fitness?" "I can handle myself." "Education level?" "Standard secondary school." "Some technical training?" "Any medical conditions?" "No, sir." Hyunwoo completed the forms and handed over a datapad. "Sign here for preliminary acceptance. You'll report to Basic Training Facility Alpha tomorrow morning. Transport leaves from here at 600 hours. Kethra signed the electronic documents. The handwriting looked appropriately human. What should I expect? 12 weeks of basic training, physical conditioning, weapons training, tactical instruction, unit cohesion exercises, If you complete basic, you'll receive assignment to an active unit. Fair warning, Kim, training is hard. Combat is harder. Make sure that basic training changed everything Kethra thought about humans. The first week was physical conditioning that pushed recruits beyond normal limits. Running, climbing, lifting, fighting. The instructors demanded performance that seemed impossible for human physiology. Many recruits couldn't keep up. They collapsed during runs or failed strength tests. Kethra expected them to be dismissed from the program. Instead, medical staff helped them recover and training continued. The humans didn't eliminate the weak. They made them stronger. Instructor Staff Sergeant Boram led physical training. She was small compared to other humans but moved with deadly efficiency. Her voice cut through exhaustion and pain like a blade. "Your body will tell you to quit," she shouted during morning exercises. "Your mind will find excuses to stop. You will ignore both. Pain is just information. Exhaustion is just data. Your mission is more important than your comfort." Kethra watched recruit Sung-min during combat training. He took a blow to the ribs that should have ended the exercise. The sound of impact was clearly audible. But Sung-min continued fighting, moving as if the injury didn't exist. When the exercise ended, medical staff examined Sung-min. 2 cracked ribs. He should have been in severe pain, yet he stood at attention while being bandaged. "How did you continue fighting?" Kethra asked him later. Sung-min shrugged. "Pain is just information. It tells you something is damaged. But if the mission isn't complete, the information isn't useful yet." The response disturbed Kethra. Humans seemed capable of ignoring biological signals that other species considered absolute. Pain, exhaustion, fear. They treated these as suggestions rather than commands. Weapons training revealed more unusual patterns. Instructor Sergeant Taeho taught projectile weapons, energy weapons, explosives, and improvised tools. But the focus wasn't on equipment specifications or optimal usage. "Your weapon will fail," Sergeant Taeho explained to the assembled recruits. "Your ammunition will run out. Your equipment will break. When that happens, everything around you becomes a potential weapon. Rocks, metal scraps, your own body. The weapon isn't the tool. The weapon is your willingness to use whatever you have." Demonstration followed. Sergeant Taeho showed how to kill with a standard eating utensil, how to create explosives from cleaning supplies, how to turn defensive positions into traps. The creativity was disturbing, but what bothered Kethra most was the psychological conditioning. Every lesson included scenarios where normal rules didn't apply. Hostage situations where saving innocent lives required killing other innocent lives. Resource shortages where helping others meant personal death. Enemy surrender offers that might be deception. Captain Yeon-soo supervised tactical training. She presented impossible scenarios where every choice led to unacceptable outcomes. Then she required recruits to choose anyway. "There are no good choices in war," she explained after a particularly difficult exercise. "There are only choices you can live with and choices that get you killed. Your job is to pick the ones that complete the mission and keep your unit alive. Everything else is luxury." During one simulation, Kethra's team faced a decision. Enemy forces were using civilian buildings as cover. Direct assault would kill innocent people. Waiting for civilians to evacuate would allow enemies to escape and kill more people later. The other recruits debated options for several minutes. Finally, recruit Hansol made the decision. "We attack now. Some civilians die today. If we wait, more civilians die tomorrow. The numbers favor immediate action." Captain Yeon-soo nodded approval. "Correct. War is mathematics with blood. Learn to calculate quickly and act without hesitation." Kethra found the psychological conditioning more disturbing than physical training. Humans were being taught to make decisions that violated basic moral principles, not from cruelty or evil, but from cold calculation about outcomes. The final week of basic training included something called unit cohesion exercises. Recruits were divided into teams and given missions that required perfect cooperation. Failure meant starting over from the beginning. Kethra's team included Sung-min, Hansol, Sunja, and Dongmin. Their mission seemed simple: navigate through obstacle course while carrying wounded teammate. Time limit was 30 minutes. The course was designed to break teams apart. Obstacles required individual skills but team coordination. The wounded teammate rotated between team members. Everyone had to carry and be carried. Most teams failed multiple times. The obstacles were too difficult for normal human capabilities. But Kethra's team discovered something during their third attempt. They could exceed normal limits by accepting that individual welfare didn't matter. When Sunja injured her ankle on a climbing wall, she didn't ask for help. She tied the ankle with cloth strips and continued climbing. When Dongmin exhausted himself carrying the current wounded teammate, he didn't ask for rest. He kept moving until collapse, then crawled to the next position. They completed the course with 4 minutes remaining. But 3 team members required medical attention afterward. The success came at a cost that seemed unreasonable. Captain Yansu reviewed their performance. Excellent work. You learned the key principle of human military effectiveness. Individual limitations are suggestions. Unit objectives are commands. When your team's mission matters more than your personal condition, you become capable of achieving impossible things. Graduation from basic training happened on a cold morning with snow falling. The ceremony was simple but formal. Colonel Ji-hoon addressed the surviving recruits. 63 out of 100 had completed the program. You are no longer civilians, the colonel announced.
You are weapons in human form.
You have been conditioned to accept losses, make hard choices, and complete missions regardless of personal cost. You will now receive assignments to active units. Kethra received assignment to the 47th Human Expeditionary Force, currently deployed in the Taeyang system. The unit was engaged in defensive operations against hegemony forces. Transport would depart in 2 days. During the brief leave period, Kethra compiled initial observations for eventual transmission to Veltari Command. The findings were disturbing. Human military training didn't just teach combat skills. It reconstructed human psychology to eliminate limitations that other species considered fundamental. Pain, exhaustion, moral conflict, personal safety. Humans learned to treat these as minor inconveniences rather than absolute constraints. The conditioning was systematic and thorough. Recruits emerged as something different from normal humans. Transport to Taeyang system took 6 days aboard a military vessel. Kethra shared quarters with other new arrivals. The ship carried supplies, replacement personnel, and equipment for multiple units. During the journey, Kethra observed veteran soldiers returning from leave. Their behavior was different from new recruits. They moved with confidence that suggested extensive combat experience. Their conversations included casual references to events that would traumatize civilian populations. Sergeant First Class, In-ho described a recent battle where his unit eliminated an enemy position by collapsing a building. When someone asked about civilian casualties, he shrugged. 17 confirmed. Probably more in the basement levels. But the position was neutralized and we lost 0 friendlies. Good trade. The casual attitude towards civilian deaths disturbed Kethra. These weren't psychopaths or monsters. They were ordinary humans who had been conditioned to evaluate all outcomes in terms of mission success and unit survival. Corporal Misun shared stories about interrogating captured enemies. The techniques she described violated every convention of prisoner treatment that Veltari military doctrine recognized. Yet she spoke about them as normal procedures. Information extraction is about efficiency, she explained to the newer soldiers. Geneva Conventions assume your enemy follows the same rules. When they don't, following those rules gets your people killed. We adapt our methods to achieve results. Kethra realized that human military conditioning included selective abandonment of moral constraints. Not complete elimination, but contextual suspension when those constraints interfered with mission objectives. The transport arrived at Taeyang system during a combat alert. Hegemony scouts had been detected near the outer planets. All personnel immediately reported to battle stations. Through observation ports, Kethra saw the system for the first time. Taeyang contained 7 planets with extensive mining operations on 3 of them. Human defensive positions were scattered throughout the system, connected by patrol routes and communication networks. The 47th Human Expeditionary Force was headquartered on Taeyang Prime, the 4th planet. Rocky world with thin atmosphere and artificial habitats protecting mining operations. Population was mostly military personnel and essential civilian workers. Commander General Mi Young met the new arrivals at the spaceport. She was a compact woman with gray hair and eyes that seemed to calculate constantly. Her uniform showed decorations from multiple campaigns. "Welcome to Taeyang System," she announced to the assembled group. "You are now part of the 47th Expeditionary Force. Our mission is to hold this system against hegemony expansion. Current intelligence suggests they will commit significant forces to drive us out." She walked along the line of new personnel, examining each person briefly. When she reached Kethra, she paused for. The hegemony attack came 3 weeks after Kethra's arrival. Intelligence reports showed a massive fleet approaching Taeyang system. 200 ships including heavy cruisers and assault carriers. The human defensive force numbered 63 ships plus ground installations. General Mi Young called a command meeting in the Underground Operations Center. All unit leaders attended, including Lieutenant Dae-hyun. Kethra was present as part of the reconnaissance team. Current force analysis, the general began, displaying tactical information on holographic screens. Enemy fleet outnumbers us 3-1. Their ships are larger and more heavily armed. Standard defensive doctrine would recommend strategic withdrawal to more favorable positions. The officers studied the displays. Numbers and trajectories painted a clear picture. Human forces couldn't win a direct confrontation. Retreat seemed logical. However, General Mi Young continued, withdrawal from Taeyang system would give the hegemony control of mining operations that supply 17 other human colonies. Loss of those resources would affect defensive capabilities across this entire sector. Major Young-soo raised his hand. What are our alternatives, General? We implement Protocol 7, she replied. Accept heavy losses in exchange for maximum damage to enemy forces. Make the cost of victory so high that they reconsider future expansion into human territory. Kethra had never heard of Protocol 7. Lieutenant Dae-hyun noticed the confusion and whispered an explanation. Calculated sacrifice strategy. We can't win, so we make winning too expensive to be worthwhile. The concept violated every principle of military logic that Kethra understood. Forces facing impossible odds should preserve themselves for future battles. Deliberate sacrifice accomplished nothing except reducing available personnel. But humans seemed to think differently. Colonel Chanuk presented the tactical plan. Human ships would engage in close combat where superior hegemony weapons couldn't be used effectively. Ground forces would allow enemy landings, then conduct defensive operations designed to maximize enemy casualties rather than protect human positions. Expected human losses? Asked Major Young-soo. 70 to 80% casualties across all units, Colonel Chan-uk replied without emotion. Fleet losses will be nearly total. Ground forces will be reduced to 15 to 20% effective strength. The numbers were catastrophic. Normal military forces would refuse such orders. But the human officers accepted the plan without protest. They began discussing implementation details as if massive casualties were routine operational considerations. Captain Jae-won commanded the fighter squadrons. His part of Protocol 7 was particularly disturbing. When his fighters ran out of missiles and ammunition, they would conduct ramming attacks against enemy capital ships. Sir, one of his pilots asked during the briefing, what about pilot survival after impact? Pilot survival is not a mission parameter, Captain Jae-won answered. Your mission is to disable or destroy enemy vessels. Use whatever methods achieve that goal. Kethra watched the pilots accept orders that meant certain death. No hesitation or protest. They discussed technical details of ramming attacks with the same professional attitude they used for normal combat missions. The psychological conditioning was more thorough than Kethra had realized. These humans had been trained to treat their own lives as expendable resources. Death was acceptable if it served mission objectives. Lieutenant Dae-hyun's reconnaissance unit received orders to conduct deep infiltration of enemy positions after the landings began. Their mission was intelligence gathering and target designation for orbital bombardment. Expected survival time was 6 to 8 hours. Equipment loadout will be light combat gear and maximum communications equipment, the lieutenant explained to his team. We won't be coming back, so carry only what's needed for the mission. Sergeant Woo-seok asked about extraction procedures. Sir, are there any contingency plans for withdrawal if the mission is completed early? No extraction plans, Dae-hyun replied. We stay in position and continue reporting until communications are lost or unit is eliminated. The information we provide will be more valuable than our survival. Kethra felt something like horror. These humans were planning their own deaths as casually as they planned equipment distribution. The conditioning had eliminated normal self-preservation instincts completely. The first engagement began when hegemony scouts entered the outer system. Human patrol ships attacked immediately, following Protocol 7 parameters. Instead of avoiding superior enemy forces, they closed to point-blank range and engaged in what amounted to suicide missions. Kethra observed the battle from the command center. Human ships rammed enemy vessels after their weapons were disabled. Fighter pilots ejected from damaged craft and used personal weapons to attack enemy hull plating. Crews from destroyed ships continued fighting using escape pod equipment. The tactical result was impossible. 12 human patrol ships destroyed 37 hegemony vessels before being eliminated. Loss ratios that violated every principle of military mathematics. The humans had turned certain defeat into strategic advantage through willingness to accept total casualties. But the disturbing part was the human reaction to these losses. General Mi Young reviewed casualty reports with satisfaction rather than grief. Excellent performance. Better than projected efficiency. The main fleet will be more cautious now. Kethra realized that humans didn't measure success the same way other species did. Feltari military doctrine prioritized preservation of forces and equipment. Humans prioritized mission accomplishment regardless of costs. The main hegemony fleet arrived 2 days later. Protocol 7 moved to the next phase. Human ships positioned themselves in asteroid fields and debris clouds, where enemy advantages in range and firepower were neutralized. Captain So Young commanded the frigate where Kethra was stationed for observation purposes. Her ship was tasked with drawing enemy fire while larger human vessels maneuvered for attack positions. "Our job is to be a target," Captain So Young explained to her crew. "Make them shoot at us instead of our heavy cruisers. Stay alive as long as possible, but remember that taking damage is part of the mission." The frigate lasted 43 minutes under concentrated enemy fire. During that time, Captain So Young kept her ship operational through damage that should have been fatal. When life support failed, the crew continued working in vacuum suits. When the main reactor was hit, they switched to emergency power and reduced capabilities. When the ship finally broke apart, the crew used escape pods to continue the mission. They attached explosive charges to hegemony ships that approached to recover prisoners. Captain So Young's final order was transmitted from her damaged pod. "Detonate on my signal. Maximum enemy casualties." 17 escape pods exploded simultaneously, destroying 2 enemy cruisers and damaging 3 others. The humans had turned their own rescue equipment into weapons. Even defeat became a form of victory. The ground battle began when hegemony forces landed on Taeyang Prime. General Mi Young allowed the landings to proceed without orbital bombardment. This seemed like a tactical error until Kethra understood the strategy. Human ground forces were positioned to maximize enemy casualties rather than defend territory. They allowed hegemony troops to establish positions, then attacked using methods that guaranteed mutual destruction. Lieutenant Daehyun's reconnaissance unit infiltrated enemy lines on the first day. Their mission was to identify command positions and weapons depots for targeting, but they also conducted direct attacks when opportunities arose. During one such attack, the unit discovered a hegemony field hospital treating wounded soldiers. Standard military doctrine protected medical facilities. They were not legitimate targets under normal circumstances. "Intelligence value versus tactical opportunity," Lieutenant Daehyun said, studying the facility through surveillance equipment. "Medical personnel will treat wounded who return to combat. Eliminating them reduces enemy fighting effectiveness." Sergeant Woo-seok raised concerns. "Sir, medical facilities are protected under warfare conventions." "Warfare conventions assume your enemy follows the same rules," Daehyun replied. "The hegemony has targeted our medical facilities in previous engagements. We adapt our tactics accordingly." The attack on the field hospital succeeded completely. No survivors among medical staff or patients. But what disturbed Kethra was the methodical nature of the operation. The humans weren't acting from anger or hatred. They had calculated that eliminating medical support was more valuable than following conventional rules. Over the following weeks, Kethra observed systematic abandonment of normal military constraints. Human forces targeted civilian infrastructure that supported enemy operations. They used captured enemy weapons and uniforms to conduct false flag attacks. They deliberately created situations where enemy forces would accidentally fire on their own units. The psychological conditioning extended beyond accepting casualties. Humans had been trained to disregard any rule or custom that interfered with mission success. Moral constraints were treated as optional guidelines rather than absolute requirements. Major Dong-hyun commanded artillery units during the ground campaign. His targeting priorities included schools and hospitals being used as enemy command posts. When asked about After the hegemony withdrawal from Taeyang's system, Kethra expected a period of recovery and defensive preparation. Instead, human forces immediately began planning offensive operations. The victory hadn't satisfied them. It had encouraged them to seek larger conflicts. General Mi Young convened strategic planning sessions with her senior staff. Kethra attended as part of Lieutenant Dae Hyun's reconnaissance unit. The discussions revealed human, military thinking on a scale that exceeded previous observations. Intelligence. Reports suggest the hegemony is consolidating. Forces in the Kepler sector, reported Colonel Chanuk, 3-star systems with major military installations. They're preparing defensive positions to prevent further human expansion. Major Young-Soo studied tactical displays showing enemy positions. Estimated force strength: 1,200 ships across all 3 systems. Ground forces numbering approximately 2 million personnel. Fixed installations include orbital weapons platforms and planetary defense grids. The numbers represented overwhelming enemy superiority. Human forces in the region totaled 300 ships and fewer than 500,000 personnel. Normal military logic would recommend avoiding such odds entirely. Recommendations for engagement? General Mi Young asked. Colonel Chanuk activated detailed battle plans. Simultaneous assault on all 3 systems. Prevent enemy forces from supporting each other. Accept total casualties in exchange for maximum damage to hegemony infrastructure. It was Protocol 7 expanded to a strategic level, not just accepting heavy losses for tactical advantage, but planning the complete destruction of human forces to achieve strategic objectives. But the plan included elements that disturbed Kethra even more than massive casualties. Human forces would target civilian populations in hegemony systems, not as collateral damage but as primary objectives. Civilian infrastructure analysis Colonel Min Seo presented data on enemy population centers, food production, medical facilities, educational institutions, transportation networks. Eliminating these targets will force the hegemony to divert military resources to humanitarian support. The plan was systematic genocide disguised as military strategy. Humans would destroy the foundation of enemy civilization while claiming tactical necessity. Population estimates after infrastructure destruction? Asked Major Dong Hyun. 70 to 80% casualties within 6 months, Colonel Min Seo replied. Remaining populations will be dependent on external support for survival. Effectively removes 3 systems from enemy control permanently. General Mi Young approved the plan without hesitation. Execute preparation phase immediately. Fleet deployment begins in 4 weeks. Kethra realized that humans had redefined the concept of victory. They weren't trying to defeat enemy forces. They were trying to eliminate enemy populations. War had become a tool for species-level extinction. During the preparation phase, Kethra observed human psychological conditioning at its most extreme. Personnel received training in what military doctrine called necessity protocols. These were procedures for committing acts that would normally be considered war crimes. Dr. Tae Young supervised the psychological preparation. He was a military counselor whose job was helping soldiers accept their assigned roles in the operation. Moral conflict is a luxury we cannot afford, he explained to assembled units. Your personal feelings about targeting civilians are irrelevant. Your mission is to ensure human survival by eliminating threats to human existence. Everything else is distraction. The conditioning sessions lasted hours each day. Soldiers watched recordings of hegemony attacks on human colonies. They reviewed intelligence about enemy plans for human extermination. They received detailed explanations about why civilian casualties were strategically necessary. The enemy population supports military operations against humans, Dr. Tae Young continued. They produce weapons, provide recruits, develop technology, and offer economic support. Eliminating civilian populations eliminates these support systems. Gradually, Kethra watched human personnel accept responsibility for genocide, not through hatred or fanaticism, but through logical analysis of strategic requirements. They had been convinced that civilian extermination was necessary for human survival. Captain Jae-won commanded bomber squadrons tasked with destroying civilian targets. His briefings to flight crews were coldly professional. Primary targets include schools, hospitals, food distribution centers, and residential areas, he explained, displaying target lists. Secondary targets are transportation hubs and communication facilities. Tertiary targets are any remaining infrastructure that supports civilian life. One pilot asked about rules of engagement. "Sir, what if civilian populations attempt to surrender?" "No prisoners," Captain J1 replied immediately. "Prisoners require resources for detention and processing. Those resources are needed for continued military operations. All enemy personnel are to be eliminated regardless of surrender attempts." The psychological framework was complete. Humans had convinced themselves that mercy was a strategic weakness that endangered their own survival. They had eliminated moral constraints entirely in favor of mathematical calculations about efficiency. But the most disturbing aspect was how normal this seemed to human personnel. They discussed genocide with the same professional attitude they used for routine military operations. The conditioning had made the unthinkable seem logical and necessary. Lieutenant Dae-hyun's reconnaissance unit received special assignment for the offensive operation. They would infiltrate hegemony systems before the main attack and gather intelligence about civilian population centers. Detailed mapping of schools, hospitals, residential areas, the lieutenant explained during mission briefing. "We need precise targeting data to maximize casualty rates and minimize ammunition expenditure." Sergeant Woo-seok asked about mission duration. "Sir, how long do we remain in position?" "Until target elimination is complete," Dae-hyun replied. "Estimated mission time is 4 to 6 weeks. No extraction procedures. We continue reporting until communications are lost or unit is eliminated." Another suicide mission. But this time, the purpose was facilitating mass murder rather than military objectives. Kethra felt something approaching revulsion at the human capacity for rationalizing any behavior. The infiltration mission launched on schedule. Kethra's unit traveled to the Kepler-3 system using captured hegemony transport. Their cover identity was refugee evacuation from recent human attacks. Kepler-3 contained 2 billion inhabitants living on 4 planets and dozens of space stations. Most were civilian populations with minimal military significance. But human strategy treated them as legitimate targets for total elimination. During the 6-day journey, Kethra observed team preparation. The humans reviewed civilian population data with the same attention they usually devoted to enemy military capabilities. They studied school schedules, hospital patient loads, residential density patterns. Peak casualty efficiency occurs during daylight hours when schools and workplaces have maximum occupancy, Sergeant Woo-seok noted while reviewing targeting data. Evening attacks catch residential areas at full capacity. Coordinated timing maximizes elimination rates. They were planning the most efficient methods for killing children and families. The technical discussion was conducted with professional detachment that made it more horrifying than emotional fanaticism would have been. The infiltration succeeded without difficulty. Hegemony security assumed the transport carried legitimate refugees. Kethra's unit was processed through standard evacuation procedures and assigned temporary housing in civilian areas. Over the following days, they mapped every significant population center in the system. Schools with thousands of students, hospitals treating hundreds of patients, residential complexes housing millions of families, all became entries in target databases. The most disturbing incident occurred during reconnaissance of a children's medical facility. The hospital specialized in treating genetic disorders that affected young hegemony populations. Patients were typically between ages 3 and 12. High-value target, Lieutenant Dae-hyun noted while observing the facility. Eliminating this population prevents future enemy recruitment while reducing enemy resource expenditure on medical support. Kethra watched him calculate the strategic benefit of murdering sick children. The psychological conditioning was so thorough that humans could find tactical justification for any atrocity. "Sir," Corporal Hyejin asked, "what about psychological impact on enemy populations?" "Terror is a force multiplier," Dae-hyun replied. "Targeting children in medical facilities creates fear that degrades enemy morale and resistance capability. Surviving populations become easier to control or eliminate." They were deliberately planning to use horror as a weapon, not just killing enemy populations, but killing them in ways designed to terrorize survivors into submission. The reconnaissance phase lasted 3 weeks. During that time, Kethra observed human strategic thinking at its most extreme. Every civilian facility became a military target. Every population center became an elimination priority. Every moral constraint was discarded in favor of tactical efficiency. When the main human fleet arrived in Kepler systems, the attack began with coordinated strikes on civilian targets. Schools destroyed during peak attendance. The extraction signal came on schedule after 6 months of observation. Kethra's mission was complete. A Veltari stealth ship would arrive at predetermined coordinates in the asteroid belt of the Kepler system. The infiltration would end and the report would begin. But something had changed during those months of watching human warfare. Kethra felt reluctance to leave. Not attachment to the humans, but fear of what would happen when the Veltari collective received the observations. The final week of the mission provided the most disturbing revelations. Human forces had completed their objectives in the Kepler systems. 3 civilizations had been reduced to empty space and debris fields. But the humans weren't finished. General Mi-young convened a strategic planning session to discuss expansion priorities. Kethra attended as part of Lieutenant Dae-hyun's unit, which had survived the reconnaissance mission, despite expectations of total casualties. Intelligence reports identify 17 hegemony systems within operational range. Colonel Chanuk presented tactical data. Population estimates range from 500 million to 3 billion per system. Combined population approximately 27 billion individuals. Major Young-soo studied the information. Projected timeline for complete elimination? Using current force levels and operational tempo, 18 to 24 months for total sterilization. Colonel Chanuk replied. This assumes no significant enemy resistance and optimal casualty rates. They were planning the extinction of 27 billion beings with the same professional attitude they used for routine military exercises. The numbers were discussed like logistic statistics rather than lives. But the most chilling moment came when General Mi-young addressed long-term strategic objectives. After hegemony elimination is complete, we'll need to identify the next threat to human survival. Intelligence suggests several species in adjacent sectors have potential for future conflict. Captain Jae-won asked for clarification. General, are you recommending preemptive elimination of potential threats? Preemptive elimination prevents future conflicts, she replied. It's more efficient to eliminate potential enemies while they're weak, rather than wait for them to become actual threats. Kethra realized that humans had adopted a strategic doctrine of universal genocide. They would eliminate any species that might potentially threaten human existence in the future, not in response to actual threats, but to prevent theoretical possibilities. The psychological conditioning was so complete that humans could justify exterminating entire civilizations based on mathematical projections about future risk. They had weaponized their survival instincts to an extent that made them a threat to all other life in the galaxy. During the final reconnaissance mission, Kethra observed human forces implementing new protocols for dealing with surrendering populations. Standard military doctrine required accepting surrender and processing prisoners according to established conventions. Human doctrine had evolved beyond such constraints. Lieutenant Dae-hyun received orders that clarified current policy regarding enemy surrender attempts. No prisoners under any circumstances, the orders stated. Surrendering populations are to be eliminated immediately. Detention facilities require resources that are needed for continued operations. Dead enemies cannot escape rebel or provide intelligence to other enemy forces. The humans had determined that killing surrendering populations was more efficient than following traditional military procedures. They had eliminated mercy entirely from their operational framework. But the most disturbing development was the psychological support system for human personnel. Dr. Tae-young had developed counseling techniques that helped soldiers maintain mental stability while committing systematic genocide. Guilt and remorse are emotional responses that interfere with mission effectiveness, he explained during a training session. Our conditioning techniques help personnel process these emotions appropriately and continue functioning at optimal levels. The counseling didn't prevent psychological trauma. It channeled trauma in ways that made soldiers more effective killers. Humans had learned to transform moral horror into operational motivation. Kethra observed counseling sessions where soldiers discussed their experiences eliminating civilian populations. The focus wasn't on reducing psychological damage. It was on maximizing future killing efficiency while maintaining unit cohesion. I killed 43 children during the school attack, reported Corporal Minho during one session. The experience was disturbing initially. but analysis shows that eliminating enemy youth prevents future military recruitment. The tactical benefit outweighs emotional concerns. Dr. Tae-young nodded approvingly. Excellent psychological integration. You've successfully processed moral conflict and maintained operational effectiveness. How do you feel about similar missions in the future? Ready to proceed with maximum efficiency, Corporal Minho replied. Personal feelings are less important than strategic objectives. The conditioning was so thorough that humans could commit atrocities while maintaining psychological stability and operational readiness. They had solved the problem of moral constraints by redefining morality itself. 3 days before extraction, Kethra experienced the most terrifying moment of the entire mission. While preparing final reports in a secure communication facility, footsteps approached from behind. "Kim Kethra," said a familiar voice. Or should I say Analyst Kethra of the Veltari Collective. Kethra turned to see Colonel Wu Jin, the intelligence officer responsible for security operations. His expression showed calm certainty rather than suspicion or anger. "I don't understand," Kethra replied, trying to maintain the cover identity. "We've known about your infiltration since the second week of basic training," Colonel Wu Jin continued. "Biomimetic technology is impressive but not perfect. Your physiological responses to combat stress were within normal parameters, but followed patterns that suggested artificial conditioning. The infiltration had failed. Kethra had been discovered and observed throughout the entire mission, but the humans had allowed the observation to continue. The question was why. You wanted me to observe your operations, Kethra stated. It wasn't a question. Correct, Colonel Wu Jin confirmed. We wanted the Veltari Collective to understand exactly what they're dealing with. Fear is more efficient than respect. Terrified enemies avoid conflict entirely. The humans had turned the espionage mission into a psychological weapon. They wanted other species to know about their capabilities. They were using terror as a strategic tool for preventing future conflicts. Your report will be transmitted to Veltari High Command, Colonel Wu Jin continued. They'll learn that humans have eliminated the constraints that limit other species' military effectiveness. They'll understand that we can justify any action in the name of survival. They'll realize that we consider preemptive elimination a legitimate strategy. The psychological warfare was directed at the Veltari leadership. Humans wanted them to be afraid. They wanted neutral species to remain neutral through terror rather than treaties. What happens now? Kethra asked. You complete your mission, Colonel Wu Jin replied. Return to your people. Deliver your report. Recommend that the Veltari Collective maintain strict neutrality and avoid any contact with human space. He handed Kethra a data storage device. This contains additional information about human strategic capabilities, population elimination techniques, psychological conditioning methods, long-term expansion plans. Share it with your leadership. The device felt cold in Kethra's hands. It contained information that would terrify any species that learned about human warfare capabilities. The humans were ensuring that terror would be complete and accurate. One final message for your high command, Colonel Wu Jin added. Tell them that we have contingency plans for every species in this galaxy, including the Veltari. Detailed analysis of your military capabilities, psychological weaknesses, and optimal elimination strategies. The threat was clear and absolute. Humans had studied other species with the same analytical approach they used for military targets. They were prepared to eliminate any potential threat to human survival. Extraction proceeded on schedule. Kethra reached the rendezvous coordinates and boarded the Veltari stealth ship. The journey back to Veltaros Prime took 8 days. During that time, Kethra compiled the final report and tried to process the psychological impact of 6 months observing human warfare. The humans had exceeded every prediction about military effectiveness. They had eliminated moral constraints, weaponized their survival instincts, and created strategic doctrines that treated genocide as routine operational procedure. But the most terrifying realization was their efficiency. The psychological conditioning was so thorough that humans could commit any atrocity while maintaining stability and readiness for future operations. They had solved the fundamental problem of warfare by eliminating the psychological barriers that prevented total ruthlessness. The report to Veltari High Command was classified at the highest security levels. Kethra presented the findings to the same council that had authorized the mission 6 months earlier. The humans represent a threat beyond current understanding of military science, Kethra concluded. They have weaponized their entire psychological framework to eliminate operational,